407 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. These are the opening lines of the Gettysburg Address, one of the most famous and oft-quoted speeches in American history, delivered by President Abraham Lincoln on the 19th of November 1863, and outlining the ethos at the heart of the American Civil War, namely the abolition of slavery. The speech was given 4.5 months after the clash from which it took its name, the Battle of Gettysburg. The battle lasted for 3 days, from the 1st to the 3rd of July 1863, and is generally regarded as the turning point of the 4-year war. The Confederate troops of the southern states were led by General Robert E. Lee, and having recently won an important victory at Chancellorsville, they were ready to resume their second attempt at a march north, hoping to make it as far as Harrisburg in Pennsylvania, or even Philadelphia. But first, they had to get through a little town called Gettysburg. Located 8 miles to the east of South Mountain, with Marsh Creek to its southwest and Rock Creek to its southeast, Gettysburg became a borough in the early 1800s. By the time the Civil War broke out, its population was around 2,400. As General Lee reached the town, President Lincoln urged Major General Joseph Hooker and the Union Army to follow closely behind. Before the battle could commence, though, Hooker was relieved of his command, and it was Major General George Gordon Meade and the Union's Army of the Potomac who resisted Lee's attacks. The Confederates took the offensive, and on the first day they attacked some ridges to the northwest of the town. The Union's defense lines rallied, but were swiftly overcome by 2 hefty contingents of Confederate troops, orchestrated from Lee's headquarters. The Union troops retreated, scattering through the streets of the town. But that was just day 1. By the 2nd of July, with most of both armies now ready for action, Meade put his defensive strategy into play. More heavy Confederate assaults triggered fierce battles at places like Little Round Top, the Wheat Field, Devil's Den, the Peach Orchard, and, fittingly, Cemetery Hill. Overnight, the troops began to count their losses before resuming their positions the next day. Again, Lee's forces led attacks to the east and south, but the major skirmish was at Cemetery Ridge, where, against the advice of the commander, Lieutenant General James Longstreet, 12,500 Confederates took part in the ill-fated Pickett's Charge. Major General George Pickett was one of the divisional commanders, and it was his fresh troops who were earmarked to lead the assault. The attack was a disaster, with Union defenses holding firm and the Confederates sustaining terrible losses. It was the turning point of the battle, and indeed the war, with Lee forced to abandon his invasion of the North and make a long, painful retreat to Virginia. The final figures for the 3-day battle make grim reading. In just 3 days, the 2 armies suffered between 46,000 and 51,000 casualties, with over 7,860 deaths. Although the numbers of dead, wounded and captured were fairly equal on both sides, it was the Union's superior strength, nearly 94,000 men compared to the Confederates' 71,700, that led to the Southerners' defeat. Marking the difference between the hand-to-hand and artillery-led warfare of the 1800s and the all-out attacks of today with their overwhelming so-called collateral damage, there was just one documented civilian death during the battles. A 20-year-old local woman called Ginny Wade died when a stray bullet went through her window. As the armies left Gettysburg, the town was left with the cleanup operation. All those corpses were left on the ground in the hot summer sun and had to be buried swiftly. Then there were the 3,000 horse carcasses, which were burned to the south of the town, resulting in such a revolting stench that some townsfolk became ill. The debris was so extensive that Gettysburg still displayed the ravages of the fighting 4 months later, when President Lincoln arrived to dedicate the Soldiers' National Cemetery and deliver his historic address. It ended with the memorable lines, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Three, two, one.